idea what God was doing. And quite frankly, it was upsetting to them. It really was rocking their boats. Let me just give you the full scope, and then we'll go down into some of the details in some of the spots. Not all of them. The whole story here is at the end of David's travels around trying to get away from Saul. God is now moving him into the throne. Okay? Certain things have to happen before he can move into the throne. It's not like what we experience here in America. Things are much more regimented. You know who the candidates are, you know the process, you know the date that primaries are over, the election's going to happen. You know all of that. And it goes according to, clockwork in some ways. But anyway, that was really kind of predicted, and at least you know the kinds of events that are going. You don't know who is actually going to end up being the president. Here, nothing is set in stone. Everything is happening unconventionally. You have a king who's chasing around the king who's anointed, trying to kill him so that he does not come onto the throne. That's a little unusual, and certainly isn't smooth. You would think that if God was going to do something, he would do it smooth. And when things are going smooth in your life, that isn't always a God thing. Well, all of your life is a God thing, really. But, there are sometimes you say, things just went right so easily. That was God. And then things go terribly, and you say, where was God? And both of those should never be held in distinction. It's all God, and it's all him working things together. So let me just give you, how does David get to the throne from here? Well, David must leave Ziklag unattended. That's important. He's got to leave Ziklag unattended. For this to happen, David must meet King Achish to be refused at the first time. Remember, the first time he went, he had to run away. David must return to Achish after fulfilling what God wanted him to do back in Israel, gathering his people together, the 600 men and their families. David must be given a town to live in, Ziklag, with his men and his families, given by Achish. And David must raid the Amalekite towns and destroy them. That's absolutely essential for the story to continue. David must be called to fight alongside of Achish in the battle at Jezreel against Saul. In order for Ziklag to be left unattended, those are the things that have to happen, and they all happened so that it could happen. Then David must be sent back to Ziklag with all his men. Okay, duh. Well, no, wait a minute. It's really unusual. He was supposed to go and fight, but that didn't happen. He was rejected once again by the Philistine lords. He was with them in the back of the ranks with his 600 men, along with King Achish as they were traveling towards Jezreel. And on the way at Aphek, the lords had had enough. And they said, you are not coming with us. Achish, what are you thinking? Are you an idiot? This man, David, sure, he is on the outs with Saul, but what better way to get back into the goods with Saul than during the battle turn on us and then cause confusion? And pretty soon, like the last time we fight against them, we'll start killing each other. That's embarrassing. In fact, it's horrible. Let's get rid of him. So they said, you may not go with us. All right. David then must demonstrate how a true king handles crisis. In rescuing his families and becoming rich with spoil of battle, that's all essential for him to become king. For this to happen, David and his men need to discover their town burned to the ground when they arrive home. And David and his men need to grieve until they're completely exhausted. David's men must threaten to stone David to death. Ooh. David must strengthen himself in the Lord and hear that there is a way to rescue the men and women, the women and children. And then David and his men need to go after the Amalekites. And David and his men must discover a sick man in the field. All essential things for him to get the kids back and the wives back and to get all that spoil. David and his men need to follow this man to the Amalekite camp. David and his men need to strike the Amalekites and defeat them. David and his men need to divide up the spoils and bring the families home. Now, the next thing that's vital in this whole scenario is that David needs to make friends in Judah with the gifts from this battle. So David must administer the way things are divided up. There's some trouble about how things were divided up, and he made the decisions so that everyone shared and shared alike. And then there was stuff left over that he sent home to Judah so that he might give gifts to the elders in the towns where he and his men had holed up getting away from Saul, thereby making friends that would welcome him when he came home. Now, I'm telling you that I don't think David is necessarily planning all these things. God is. God is. And so then what we see here is that King Saul must vacate the throne. How's that going to happen? He's killed in battle, and there's no longer any king. And then David must be crowned king in Judah. So that's how it's going to go. This is God's overall plan. But none of the people in the plan actually know what the plan is. They're simply trusting God as they go along. Well, they're trusting as best they can, for there are times when they just, take things into their own hands, and then they there's trouble. There's real trouble. So, have you been noticing, and I trust you've been reading this over and over again, that towards the end of 1 Samuel, you see there's a back and forth kind of thing going. You hear about King Achish early in the book and around the middle of the book, and then you hear about King Achish again, and David is going there to get away from Saul. And then you hear about King Achish again when he comes. This is like at the first of chapter 28, just 3 verses. And here he says, you've got to go with me. He's thinking, I want this guy at my side. He will be my bodyguard. I want him by my side. God is thinking, I don't care about your body. I want him to go with you because I need him to vacate Ziklag, because it's essential that we burn Ziklag to the ground. What? Did God actually plan to burn Ziklag to the ground? What did David do to deserve that? It was part of the plan. David and his men needed to be willing to go home at the right time. It's sort of like the same thing as the children of Israel in Egypt. How many of the children of Israel do you think would have left with Moses if they were prospering? If they had a huge bank account, nice estate, and they were doing fine, big family, enjoying all the seasons, and Moses comes in, I'm here, God has sent me to deliver you. From what? And we're having a great time. So there had to be the 400 years of slavery and things getting worse and worse and worse until then Moses comes, yeah, good, we're going with you. Get us out of here. They were ready. Same thing happening here. I wonder how much of that's going on in our lives. Sometimes things get burned to the ground so that we might move on to something that God has for us. He's got a plan. We can't see the overall plan, but it's there. And so that has to happen here. But I was telling you about the back and forth thing. That's intentional. I know that people who are good novelists will do that to my frustration. You're going along a good part in the story, and the chapter ends. And then you start up with a whole different person. What? Let's finish this. No, just a little teaser here. I'm going to move over here and talk about this person. I'm very much tempted to go to the next chapter because I want to keep the story going. But the purpose of what God is doing here in this book is to continually go back and forth so that you are doing a comparison, back and forth. David, Saul, David, Saul, David, Saul. So we saw Saul in the middle of crisis, didn't we? What did he do? He was not a godly man. He was in the middle of the crisis, and that's the time when Saul's interested in talking to God. He has no interest in between. But when crisis comes, he wants God to speak to him. And he basically wants from God what he wants from God. He doesn't want God to tell him anything that he doesn't want to know. He doesn't want him to tell him the truth about himself. He doesn't want him to say, what things could be better. I don't care if they're going to be better. I have an enemy here, and I need to know how to defeat this enemy who far outnumbers me. And so, no word from God. No word from God from dreams, from prophets. No word from God from the priests. Let's find a medium. Let's go to the devil. He'll talk to me. So, that's sad. Sad. Well, God takes that whole attempt, and as you remember, he turns the whole thing for his own purposes. You want to talk to Samuel? Here's Samuel. Samuel, tell him what's going to happen. And so Samuel tells him his judgment, tells him he's going to be dying tomorrow. And that's the way it is because you would not obey God. The whole theme of the book is God is king. God is king, and if you treat him like a king, things will go well for you. If you treat yourself like a king, even king over whatever God's got going on, you're in trouble. So you see this contrast, and I want to see the other side of that today. We saw Saul, now we'll see David. David goes, he's going to go into battle. I need to say to you that leadership is not smooth. Any of you who are leaders, it's not smooth, right? There's nothing smooth about life, but leadership, it has its own pitfalls. You could be right on with God, you know exactly what the plan is, and you know what you're supposed to do, and then you tell your people, this is what we should do, come with me, and let's go. And you get about 30% maybe, 40% that are really on board with you. And then there are others that are following along because everybody else is. And then there's a small group of people that are just totally against whatever it is that you're doing. And they're just seeding all kinds of strife and trouble. It's just not an easy thing to do, to lead people. So how do you suppose it went for David to say to them, his 600 men, guys, listen, I want you to pack your things up. We're going into battle. Okay, we're going into battle. Who are we fighting for? What are we going to do? What's the problem? Give me a motive for what we're going to do. We are going to fight with the Philistines. What? Fight with the Philistines? Against whom? Against Israel. Against our own people? I know we have trouble with Saul, but we don't have trouble with our own people. Why are we doing this? Now, you don't see an uprising or anything like that. They go with him, but you can imagine that there are those in the ranks who are saying, I'm not really on board with this. I'm going because we're supposed to go, and I'm not, the fear that I have of being, in trouble is a little higher than my frustration. So they all go. And so when they're almost there, they've gone 3 days' journey, and they get to Aphek, and then the lords of the Philistines reject them. I mean, how many of you take rejection really well? I mean, how many of you are ready to go door to door talking about Jesus? What's the problem? A lot of times it is, I don't like people slamming the door in my face. I don't like people telling me to go away. I don't like rejection. Well, I'm sure that this whole army came and they were thinking, we are God's gift to you, Achish, because they're proud men, they're good fighters, and they are an asset. They are sort of like, black ops. They are the team to have on your team. And as they're getting close to the battle, they are just told, you know what, we don't need you, go home. That's insulting. That is insulting. And so on their way home, there's a mixture of insult and mixture of relief and a mixture of, I'm going home. I'll be glad to get home. And then 3 days journey. So how many days journey are we on now? So we're like at least 6. All right, 6 days journey. And they're coming near to home. And they're beginning to say, oh, I can't wait to see my kids. I can't wait to see my wife. And then they come over the rise. And word begins to race back through the troops. Ziklag is burned to the ground. I don't know, have you ever had something hit you between the eyes that just totally rocks you? We need to see this in a real sense. I mean, these are real people. I remember when Mita and I were coming home New Year's Eve 5 years ago. She was in the car in front of me, and I was driving with Laura behind her because we had 2 cars to bring home. She gets a call from Tim and goes around the corner on Ridge Road and pulls off to the side. And I pull off behind her wondering, why is she doing that? This is a night of hope for us. A night of hope because maybe Nina will have a transplant. Because, you know, people have a lot of accidents on New Year's Eve. There was this glimmer of hope that maybe she will live. She comes racing back to my car, rolling down my window. She says, Nina has died. Oh, no, no. It was that as they went over the hill and saw their city burned to the ground. Where are my kids? Where's my wife? And they go racing down. Heck with David, raced down the hill, looking for where their house was. Where are they? There's nobody here. And there's no bodies. They are still alive, I suppose, but they're not here. It's been a week. There's no way that we can catch up with them. They are lost forever. Do you understand now why they grieved and wept all day until they were too exhausted to grieve anymore? They got to that place, and then this never would have happened if David hadn't taken us on this lark of a trip. If we had been here, this would not have happened. Think about this in God's perspective. A lot of times we'll look back on things and say, if I had only been there, if this had only happened, if that had not happened, I could have stopped that. And guilt floods into your life. And God is up there saying, no, it's not about that. It is my plan. I have purposes in this, good purposes in this. You may never see it. You may never know what they are, but they're there and they're real. Maybe in this life, you will never know. But this morning's message is for you to trust Him. There's so many things in life you will not know. Don't just sink into conjecturing. You won't know. Simply trust. He is in control. So they begin to, talk to each other. And Gwen comes back to David. David, they're going to stone you. David lost his children. David lost his wives. They're going to stone me? What do you do then? I know what Saul would have done, but what would David do? The scriptures tell us that David strengthened himself in the Lord. What does that look like? I think he went into his tent, got alone with God, threw himself on his face, and cried out to him, Lord, what are you doing? Lord, what are you doing? And he cried and he cried. I know this because that was how he does it in the Psalms. They're a wide open window to us as to how David processes things. He first tells God honestly, openly, Lord, I don't understand this. I don't know what's going on here. Where are you? Why did this happen? You led me to go with Achash. Now look what's happened here. So he works through that and he expresses his fears and his grief, crying to God. God knows about these things. He knows how they feel. And then God gradually begins to turn his thinking. Gradually turns his thinking. David begins to say, maybe it isn't too late. Maybe it isn't too late. I need a word on this, because if I go out and tell these people that it may not be too late to go after the Amalekites, they're going to kill me right away. Bring in Abiathar. Bring the ephod. God, show me. Show me right here. Is it too late? It's not too late. Will we win? You will win. Let's go. Let's go. And so he goes out and he says to the men, listen, men, I know that you are angry with me. I know that you are so wrought with sorrow, but God has not left us, gang. And he has given me a word through the Urim and Thummim that we indeed can catch them. And we will get our wives and children back. Who's with me? Ah! Everybody cries, yeah, David. I love that part. You didn't see that, did you? And so he goes, and God gives them confirmation. As they're going, that told you it's not neat. Leadership's not neat, right? You got 600 men. You're actually going after a larger army again, just like Saul was. And then you get to a river that's hard to cross, and a third of your army is too exhausted. They've been marching for 6 days, and they've wept all day long, no sleep, and they can't get across the river. What do? All right, those of you who can, come with me. So 200 stay back, 400 move forward. As soon as they cross the river, they run into a guy in the field. This is awesome. There's a guy in the field. Nowhere around are any people. There's this Egyptian guy sitting in the field. He's weak from no eating, no drinking for 3 days. And what are you going to do when you see a guy in the field? You are charging forward. You want to rescue your family. And, okay, yeah, there's a guy in the field. Let's go. Let's keep on going. God said we were going to catch him. David says, no. It says in the Torah, it says, you need to treat people in need with kindness. And this is really amazing. In this particular passage, we not only know that he helped this man who had been sick for 3 days and 3 nights, but we know what he ate. I mean, it's like in the middle of a very fast and furious story, and you read that David stopped and he gave him a Big Mac and a few fries, and then he gave him, one of those Frosties, and then, why are you telling us what the man ate? Because the picture is that David stops with compassion. He meets the man's needs, and he does so generously. even though his needs are being put off. You know, when a person is really suffering and when they give to others, how important is that? How much love is there in that when their needs are screaming to be met, and there's somebody here that comes along and interrupts it all, like Jesus going off to heal raise the little girl from the dead, and this woman has got an issue of blood. He gives attention. Same picture in David. So, of course, they find out that this is an Egyptian who was the servant of Amalekite. Oh, that's interesting. Tell us, how did you get here? You know, I got sick and he dumped me. And I'm here. I've been 3 days, 3 nights. I haven't anything to eat. Where'd they go? Where'd they go? Can you tell us where they went? Sure. Can you lead us there? Yeah. Do you see God in that? You know, they're running furiously after the Amalekites. Where are they? Not sure. Heading down towards Amalekite country. I don't know where they are. But then God says, here's a little man. He's going to lead you right to them. And so he does. Of course, he makes them promise that they won't kill him and they won't hand him over to the Amalekites. But he takes them right to the place. And you notice how they find them. They're in battle formation, ready. You know, they're going to fight against him. When they arrive, can you imagine how tired these men are? You know, 200 of them are sitting back of the river because they couldn't even cross the river. These guys are running on further and further, and they arrive, and there they are. Come over their eyes. And there they are. What are they doing? They are all over the place. Not in battle formation. They're in little groups. All of them drinking and eating because they are rich. And that's the truth. I mean, you think about all the booty that was received from these guys. The Amalekites had not just burned Ziklag and taken everything from there. They had been in 3 different areas, and they were on Ziklag and the last of them. So they had gathered a very successful amount of booty. They're coming home rich men. Rich men. You know, all right, think about this. God is in control, sovereign Lord. Where did this all begin? All right, Amalekites, I'm going to send you on a trip. I want you to gather a whole lot of booty, and I want you to give it to David, because he's going to need it in order to make a way to make friends with those who are in Judah so that he can become king. See, you are my instruments, and I am using you. That isn't how the men of David felt when they found their city burned to the ground. They weren't thinking, oh, good, God's in control. This is just a part of his plan. God, what do you want us to do next? It wasn't that way at all. But that's exactly what was going on, because God very sovereignly was moving things so that all of this would come together at the right time. So they come against the army who's not prepared for them, and they do a lightning strike, and they come in and they just decimate this enemy, the Amalekites. And funny, not a single wife, not a single child is lost. God took away Ziklag, but he preserved. I mean, if an Amalekite had tried to hurt one of those women or one of those children, he would have been struck dead in a second, because God was preserving them to be restored. That was all part of the plan. They're restored. They're going home. A little more difficulty in leadership. They get back to the 200 men that didn't really fight in the battle. And David greets them. David is saying, how you doing, guys? Get a good night's rest? Feeling better now? Feeling ready? We can go back to Ziklag? Yeah, David, yeah, we're feeling better. Thank you so much for letting us stay on this side of the river. The other men are saying, okay, yeah, we're glad you can come back with us, but you ain't getting any of the booty. You didn't fight with us. You didn't risk your lives. You're not getting anything else. You can have your wife and children if you want, but you're not getting... Now, David said that is not happening. That is not happening. Do you see now? Because he did not cave when he heard that there was people going to stone him, because he did not give up at that point, but he went and strengthened himself in the Lord, and came out with the plan that God had for him, he was still the undisputed leader of this army. And so when he said, we're not doing that, they all understood, we're not doing that. Okay, so what are we doing? We are going to share and share alike. Those who stayed with the baggage are going to get as much as you guys who fought the battle. That's the way it is. And that became a law in Israel until whenever. Okay, that was something that became a solid thing. And interesting, that the reasoning behind that David gave to them was, he says to them, we are not going to do what you suggested because we are going to express thanks to God for saving us. We are going to thank God because this stuff he's given us is a gift from God. Let's not play on the lateral level here. You must understand that God has been involved in this all the way along. And if you make something selfish out of it, you are desecrating something holy. Because the real thing is that God gave this to us. Who are you then to hoard it to yourself? So as a gift from God, we give it to everyone. He administers how it should go with lots left over. Lots left over. So that he gave incredible gifts. He sent them on ahead of him to the place in Israel because he knew that when they got back to Ziklag, they weren't going to be staying there. It was burned to the ground. Saul dies. We'll see that next time we get together, but we'll not talk about it today. See the comparison? Saul panics, goes to his own devices. David strengthens himself in the Lord. You see how unsmooth things really are? When they're not smooth in your life, take heart. Take heart. Some of us have images of the perfect Christian life, and then you have yours. Right? So there is no perfect Christian life among us anyway, right? Be glad for what you are and what you have, and be glad that God is moving you forward. That's what he was doing in David's life too. The difficulties of leadership are good for us who are in leadership position. Let's remember that it is going to be hard. It's just natural that way. But God is involved in that too if we allow him to and give us guidance and direction. All right, I think we'll stop there and we'll pick it up next week. Let's pray together. Thank you so much, Lord. Thank you that the stories in this word are real and they are people like us. And you love them as you love us. Help us to follow David's good example, Lord. Help us to trust you, even if we don't know the big plan. Thank you, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.